How many times have you had a student or more walk into the classroom and say, "What are we doing today?" And I know that can be frustrating sometimes, and you just want to say, "Sit down and you'll find out." I think this reveals a problem a little deeper with our students than we may realize. And it reminds me of a job I had when I was working my way through college that I dreaded going to every day. And it wasn't because the work was hard or I didn't enjoy the work or I didn't care for my supervisor or the people I was working for. It was just that it was never clear what I was going to do. I had to wait for someone to tell me because we did different things every day. And it just wasn't laid out. And sometimes the directions weren't clear and I wasn't sure, if I was doing it correctly. And I'm someone who would rather just try and do it than ask questions. And it was just, I just dreaded it. But later, that same program I was working with, we had a summer program where everything was laid out. We were given a grant from the government, and it was very detailed that boom, 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 we're going to do this, 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 and this every day. And I loved it because I already liked the people I was working with. I liked the work. But now, when I went in, I knew what I was going to do. I didn't have to ask somebody how to do it. It was there, it was ready, and the days just went by so much quicker. And I looked forward to that, going to the job so much more. And I think sometimes that's the way our students feel. They're a little insecure when they come in, especially middle school and, even high school students can be a little self-conscious about, looking like they know what they're doing and being cool and all that. And I think that question stems from, well, I wonder what we're doing. Am I going to be able to do it? Am I going to be embarrassed? So today I want to talk about the power of predictability and why consistent routines increase student success. I think when students don't know what's coming next, part of their attention is spent figuring out the procedures, expectations, and whether they're prepared. But when they know the routine, they can focus their energy on learning. And there are many benefits to having a predictable routine. It gives students security, it gives them confidence, it gives them efficiency, and it really does help with behavior. First of all, routines provide security. When a student knows exactly what's expected of them, they feel more comfortable walking to the classroom. They know where to begin, where the materials are, and they kind of just know the general flow of what the lesson's going to look like. The sense of predictability reduces uncertainty and helps students focus on learning rather than trying to figure out what they're supposed to be doing. Secondly, routines build confidence. The first time students complete a task, they may be unsure of themselves, but by the fifth or 10th time, they know exactly what to do. They become more independent, ask fewer procedural questions, and are willing to tackle challenges because they've experienced success before. Just as success breeds success, confidence breeds confidence. Next, routines create smoother transitions. I know that in the beginning it can feel slow. When you introduce a new procedure, you'll spend time practicing it, teaching it, and reminding students how it works. But once that routine becomes habit and established, everything will begin to speed up. Students walk in, get started, and transitions between activities and completing tasks will happen with less teacher direction and more quickly. Those saved minutes can really add up over the course of the year. Finally, routines do lead to better behavior. Many behavior issues with students start when students are confused, uncertain, or waiting around with nothing to do. When students know what is expected and can get started immediately, there's less downtime and fewer opportunities for distraction. Engaged students tend to be more focused, more productive, and easier to manage. In short, effective routines help students feel secure, build their confidence, improve the flow of the classroom, and reduce behavioral issues. The result is a learning environment where both student and teacher can spend less time managing procedures and more time focusing on learning. At this point, I want to clarify something important. When I talk about routines and predictable structures, I'm not suggesting that the students do the exact same thing in the exact same way every single day. A predictable structure is not the same as repetitive content. We're not talking about the same activity, identical assignments, no variety. This only creates boredom. What we're talking about is a predictable structure. The same process, familiar expectations, consistent routines. This is what builds confidence. The structure remains familiar, but the content remains fresh. The goal is not for the students to complete the same identical type of assignments day after day. The goal is for the students to understand the general flow of the learning process so they can focus their attention on the content rather than the procedures. Now, at this point, I do want to give you an example of a weekly structure that I kind of followed or put into my lesson plans that I sell. But the goal of this professional development video is not to give you a routine, but to stress the importance of having a routine. You develop your own routine that fits your teaching style and your students' learning environment that you have already begun to work on. Okay. So, for an example, a students might begin a new topic on Monday by reading an informational text, something out of the book, watching a video, however you introduce new information. This could be something you created, a resource you purchased, an article, or even a passage from the textbook. After reading, they might complete a vocabulary activity or answer a few comprehension questions to help them understand the main ideas. On Tuesday, students could continue exploring the same topic through a crossword puzzle, review game, or another reinforcement activity. Wednesday might include a hands-on activity, lab, activity, discussion, or project. Thursday could be used for review and practice. Friday might be reserved for an assessment, reflection activity, or another way students demonstrate what they've learned. Notice that the activities change throughout the week. The content changes from unit to unit. One week the students might be studying cells, the next week they might be studying diffusion, ecosystems, or chemical reactions. What stays the same is the overall structure. Students know they will be introduced to new information, have opportunities to practice and reinforce their learning, engage with content in different ways, and eventually demonstrate what they've learned. Before the week begins, identify the most important concepts and skills you want your students to learn from that text. Once you know your destination, you can choose activities that will support those learning goals. One thing I strongly encourage is exposing students to the text multiple times throughout the week. This builds better retention, increases fluency, stronger vocabulary, and a deeper understanding. Find different ways to engage the students in the text. As we wrap up, I'd like to leave you with a challenge. Over the next month, choose just one part of your day and make it completely predictable. It doesn't have to be your entire schedule. It doesn't have to require a major curriculum overhaul. Simply choose one routine and commit to it for a couple of weeks. Maybe it's your bell ringer. Maybe it's how students begin independent work. Maybe it's a weekly routine. Maybe it's the way you introduce a new concept. Pick one structure and stick with it long enough for the students to become comfortable with it. Pay attention to what happens. Notice how quickly students get started. Notice how many fewer procedural questions you'll answer. Notice how much smoother your transitions will become. Most importantly, notice how confidence grows. Remember, the goal is not to make every day identical. The goal is not to remove creativity or excitement from your classroom. The goal is to create a learning environment where students feel secure enough to focus on learning rather than worrying about what comes next. When students know the structure, they can focus on the content. When students feel confident, they participate more. When routines become automatic, learning becomes efficient. And when students experience success day after day, that succeed that success begins to compound. Predictable doesn't mean boring. Predictable means students know what to expect. The structure remains familiar and the learning remains fresh. Thank you for spending these few minutes with me. I hope you'll take the challenge, try one predictable routine, and see what happens in your classroom.